Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Expana's Tuesday morning market roundup. Today is Tuesday, August the 6th. Hope your day is going really well. Before we came on air today, Courtney had sent me a little note about how she's going to participate today, and it went something like the global stock sell-off sends cattle futures plummeting. And I was on my edge of my seat for the last 15 minutes waiting to hear what Courtney has to say about the cattle futures. But anyway, good morning, Courtney. Happy to have you with us today.
Good morning, Russ. Thanks so much. Happy to be here. There's a lot of market developments over the past 3 days due to that global sell-off in the stock and equities markets. This comes on the heels of some disappointing U.S. economic data and some concerns of a possible recession in the U.S. So this has had widespread implications for both the U.S. and global markets, and it's also impacted commodity futures, including those live cattle and feeder futures. This here is an overview of the meats futures, including live cattle, feeder cattle, and lean hog futures. And these were the settlement prices for Monday. So as we can see, very sharp declines for both live cattle and feeder futures. But the lean hog futures didn't see declines nearly as pronounced as that cattle complex. If we take a deeper look at the feeder cattle futures in particular, we can see the steep downturn that began at the start of this month and into yesterday's settlement price. They shed over $5 to settle at $244 per hundredweight, and that actually brought it below the year ago price for the first time so far in 2024. It's a similar story on the live cattle futures side. We saw the front month close over $2 lower yesterday, settled at about $182 per hundredweight, and that's at a very steep discount to what the current cash market is trading at. Speaking of that cash market, if we took a look at the Cattle Facts live cattle six-state Fed steer price, it has backed off a little bit from those all-time record highs we saw earlier in July, but it's still sitting at record high levels. So even with this downturn in the futures markets, we can see that prices do remain elevated from a historical standpoint. I do want to bring up the weights situation again. I know this has been an ongoing topic of discussion throughout this year, and it's worth noting that this discrepancy between current levels and year ago levels remain extremely pronounced. They are more than 20 pounds above last year, and they actually bottomed in late January when typically they would bottom sometime in late May or early June. So this has had a big impact on the amount of tonnage that is coming onto the marketplace. Even though we do have sharply lower year-over-year cattle slaughter levels, that beef production is being offset a little bit by these much heavier carcass weights. Just to round things out, the trade is keeping an eye on a lot of things, including those futures prices, but also those wholesale beef prices. We are in the midst of the dog days of summer. It's notorious for sluggish beef demand, and we are seeing a generally steady undertone in the wholesale beef market right now. But again, that is at seasonal all-time highs. So a lot to monitor going forward, and the trade is anxiously awaiting to see how that futures board will open in just a few minutes here.
And thank you, Courtney. Boy, those numbers, I mean, the live weight, the Fed steer price, and of course the weekly that you just showed us there, amazing. I mean, how revealing, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens as we move forward in the year. Always appreciate your input, Courtney. Great job. And well, maybe this wasn't quite as gripping. Pete, you're going to present to us a little pork overview this morning. Always good to see you. Hope you're well this morning.
Doing well, Russ. Good morning, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, on the pork side of things, it's been a summer of divergent perspectives, if you will. There's quite a lot of folks that have been monitoring, current seasonal trend comparisons as slaughter levels overall remain elevated by comparison to years past, and also hog weights also remain on the high side as well. And that's kind of creating, some the divergent opinions, that we're coming across, where some some folks are of the opinion that seasonal trends would react in a certain way in accordance to what we're seeing currently in terms of those elevated levels, and other folks are more on the sort of historical kind of data or historical sort of seasonal trends that everyone's much more accustomed to. And coming out of those conversations, the two items that were perhaps the most hotly talked about throughout the month of July were certainly the bone and hams as well as the bellies. According to the Erna Barry by Expana platform, the bone and hams were going into a period of elevation as we entered the beginning of July, spreading all the way through at its highest peak on the 22nd, where it reached a value of 117 or 118, if you round it up, basically. And from there, things began to sort of decline the last 2 weeks of the month to a point where, by comparison to current levels, the values have declined about 14% roughly in those 2 weeks. Now, one of the main driving factors, which perhaps we have talked about in the past as well, but it's really important to take a look at, has been the foreign exchange rates in terms of the peso to Mexican, I'm sorry, to the Mexican peso to US dollar exchange rate. And we're looking here basically at a weekly view, but you can see that the weakness began kind of almost at the same time, that the month started. But before that, there was that sort of downturn we saw on the previous screen. And as we moved through July, the peso continued to consistently weaken, presenting some challenges for Mexican importers in terms of securing their material at a good exchange rate. Now, one of the things that's kind of important to consider here is that despite the chart that we're seeing here, the values still are well above year over year, as well as the 3-year average, and they're kind of heading in a trajectory where it's kind of similar to some of the past years, albeit elevated prices. But there are some challenges that have come up in conversations, from the Mexican side, as live hog weights internally remain elevated there, and also some narratives of concern of disease have sort of emerged, and certainly those are two items that we will continue to monitor. But that could really be one of the factors that could be affecting the trajectory moving forward. Now, moving on to the second item that has been discussed or has come up in conversations relatively frequently, has been the current state of the bellies. Now, the chart that we see here on the platform is looking at values that have been elevated basically since the beginning of the month, right, and had been remained consistent throughout. However, if we're able to get an idea here of where it is versus the 3-year average, we see that it's still well below that number, and also well below year over year levels. Now, a lot of the narratives have really come across with the concern of the increasing price levels, and the one thing that I do believe it hasn't come up as often has been the comparison in year over year. Now we see a big gap here. The year over year percentage is roughly about 43%, actually, according to my notes here. But last year around this time, we had, if you recall, a mass exodus of pork material heading into California for Prop 12, just before the Prop 12 implementation. So that really created a large uptick in the values at that time as well. So we're really kind of seeing some similar trajectory here if we compare it to previous years as well. But the big disparaging of opinion here, it comes, where is this going to go? Is this going to kind of go in an area where it goes above the average or year over year comparison? Is it possible? Perhaps. One of the things that is interesting to note in that, or an important element, would be current cold storage stocks for bellies specifically, which are at this point down, trending again by comparison in similar trajectory, but still down below year over year. Matter of fact, it's below 15.6% below year over year values at present. So these are interesting factors to continue to monitor. It definitely has been an interesting summer in terms of elements and the differences, again, of opinion between participants as they compare some of the seasonal trends that they're used to and some current performance, and then sort of try to forward think that way.
And thank you, Pete. Well, looking at that chart, all I could think about was maybe this fall would be a good time for some bacon features so I can stock up a little bit. But great insight. Very much appreciated, Pete, as always. And we also, of course, appreciate all of our viewers for joining us. This has been Expana's Tuesday morning market roundup. We hope that you have a super day.